Watson, our first speaker would like to share some slides. Can you make Heidi Hund
Winona County Board. I just
make the
emailed her.
Winona County Board room a host or give us ability to share our screens?
I've done that for the boardroom and for Heidi.
Okay. Now that we're done with introductions, thank you all so much for coming today. Our first item is commissioner discussion items. And I am gonna not take any time, but Commissioner Ward, did you want to make a statement about some of your priorities?
Yes, please. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us today. I know you're on a fast treadmill up there. Things are, we can't keep track of what's going on down here in the hinterlands. I'm sure it's difficult for you to keep track of what's going on there in St. Paul. The big plea is with the rapidness of things happening, just keep in mind, where counties fit in some of this legislative and these processes and these rules. And if it's funded, if it's properly funded, or what impact it will have. I know one of the big things that's getting pushed is the marijuana, the legalization of recreational adult marijuana. And counties have kind of stayed, even as the association, kind of stayed neutral, because unfortunately we feel it's going to happen. And how can we be at the table to know how it's going to affect us and our, the policies and procedures that we have to follow. So please, with that legislation, keep us in mind. We're tend to be at the bottom of the food chain, but we a lot of times have the biggest burden of financial responsibility for some of that legislation. And then one of the big things, of course, and I know Attorney Solomon's working on it, don't lose us again, the loss, what an oxymoron, local option sales tax. We're really hoping to put that in to a referendum to let the voters decide how we will pay for the jail, which is, again, an unfunded mandate that we provide for our communities. So please see that maybe it can't get lost. Maybe it could go through as a single item versus getting thrown in with a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know if that'd be to our advantage or not. You know better than I. But those are a couple of hot topics right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have 5 presenters today. I'm hoping that each of you can try to keep your presentation to 10 minutes or less, and then we will have some time to get updates from our legislative delegation. So Kay Qualley, who is our Planning and Environmental Services Director.
Thank you to our legislators for appearing today. I'm going to have a short PowerPoint, which is going to be up in view momentarily. So as you can see from your screen, we have land use planning and zoning, invasive species and ag inspections, feedlot management, parks, trails, sustainability, energy savings, water resources, well inspections, solid waste management, and economic development. So we stay out of trouble. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, block grants, NRBG block grants pursuant to Commissioner Ward's statement have not increased over 10 years. And I'm going to zero in on one of them that's particularly problematic. That has been $18,600 since 2013. Actually, that's a slight typo. Next slide, please. So what you'll see here is the blue line represents the amount of money that is funding the program. And the red line going down to 0, not to the blue line, represents the shortfall each year, starting in 2013 with $55,000 and ending with over 100,000 for 2023. The only places there have been dips have been when people have quit and been poached by the MPCA, who provides very expensive training for the septic inspectors, and other counties who poach because there's no one to hire, no one that's trained, that's available, and there's no cost of living associated with and there's no increase, period. So you can see the shortfalls have been steadily growing since 2017, 2018, and now we're way up around 100,000. And that is true for all of those programs. I'm just showing you one that's the most problematic. Next slide, please. So to put it another way, in 2013, 18.6 was 18.6. Today, it would have to be 23,687 to be equal with just the CPI. But in fact, that would still be 80,000 short of the program. So what we're essentially saying is that all of the residents of Winona County are subsidizing every septic installation that is done. Furthermore, every septic installation that's done is not a home in a small city that's crying out for retail or for a redevelopment of their downtown. So we have a double problem occurring with this, but we certainly have an extremely unfunded program. Next slide, please. Other items from my department, public meetings, updates about remote participation, I see are starting to move through legislation for up to 3 times per year. We support that. We're not looking for people to not attend meetings because the synergy involved in meeting the public face-to-face is important for all. The next item, please support Micah, SWA, McPisa, and all of the organizations that are coming with these recommendations, including the Feedlot Officers Association. In this particular case, we ask that 100% of SCORE funding go towards solid waste abatement and not into your general fund, please. Support and have the state pay for fast charging electric vehicle chargers along I-90. That corridor was not funded the last time. 94 and 35 were, and at the county government centers and essential county sites. Those intermediate chargers that are not the fast chargers and they're not the slow ones that you'd have in your garage at home, the cost benefit ratio for those, including electricity to get them to where they need to be, and the funding available is not worth our time. Also, missing middle housing is very much needed. Pursuant to the septic discussion for workforce housing and independent seniors, we need incentives. I don't care if they're going to be 3D printed houses, tiny houses, petite houses, or whatever you want to call them. Please provide incentives to build and assemble small homes, because if the current 2-bedroom home based on developers in the Southeast Minnesota Housing Forum and Study and bus tour of last fall indicates that a 2-bedroom home is now $350,000, where 2 years ago it was $249,000. And that is what is needed, is middle housing, because what's profitable to build is $500,000 housing. And that is not going to help us. So we need those aids. Thank you. Next slide, please. So please solidify the solar panel recycling program. If we're going to do like paint care, where we're going to ask those manufacturers to fund it ahead of time, what disposal is going to be needed, that's great. But let's start to crank that up and increase the number of facilities within each sector of the state for doing this, because we're one hailstorm away from needing this. And we're going to be faced with hundreds of thousands of panels in the not too distant future. I'll be retired, but there's plenty of people that are going to inherit this problem. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Our next speaker is Karen Sanis.
Good afternoon, Representative Jacobs and Senators Miller and Drazkowski. I wanted to highlight for you today, again, I'm Karen Sanis, Health and Human Services Director for Winona County. One thing, there's multiple position statements out there for Health and Human Services, the area that we are in most dire need of here locally and at the state level is systems modernization that I wanted to highlight for you today. I have provided the Minnesota Association of County Social Service Administrators position statement, but one thing I wanted to just highlight from that position statement is that most systems DHS requires counties to use are 20 to 30 years old. They are too limited, too inflexible, and too inefficient. Persistent county workforce shortages are adding to that strain. We cannot wait years for new systems to be produced or developed. More transitional approach is needed, one that addresses the county pain points in the short term while putting the state on a solid path towards systems and practice transformation. I will just allow you to finish reading that position statement and moving forward. Within that position statement, it refers to the Gartner survey that was done, which I'm sure DHS will be able to provide you with, or our MACSA leadership. But one of the things I wanted to talk with you about today is how this impacts us here at the local level. And one of the systems I will highlight is our MACSIS system. Our MACSIS healthcare system is an eligibility system for healthcare for our aged, our blind, our deaf, and our disabled. It is an MS-DOS based system that is from the 1980s. It is not a true eligibility system. It is about 20% eligibility and about 80% of a database. What happens within this system is that the caseworkers end up gathering all the information, doing the eligibility math within figuring out the eligibility for the benefit. They input the information into the system, and then the state of Minnesota issues the benefit, the healthcare benefit. The issue that we are seeing is that if a caseworker does not enter all of the information into the system, the benefit still can be issued. Where this has come in into an issue for us here at the local level is that it is a very error-prone system, which has caused Winona County, just want to preface that I inherited this, I did not create this, is that since 2013, from 2013 to 2021, Winona County has not passed a federal audit for the Maxis healthcare system. In 2022, we did pass our healthcare audit, but in order to pass that healthcare audit, we had to take some very significant remedies that are very time consuming for staff. There is no way to run reports within the system because it is so old and so antiquated that we have to manually go into the system and do peer reviews. So if myself and let's say Maureen Holte are eligibility workers, I randomly select work, some of her work. I go through my checklist and go into the system to see if she has all the eligibility criteria met within the system. She would do the same for me. Again, is very time consuming and very inefficient. And so we are, and then we also are requiring our supervisors to do those desk reviews with going into the system manually and looking through to assure that criteria is met within the system, that the system itself cannot do for itself. This, like I said, it is very inefficient. It is very burdensome on our caseworkers and on our supervisors that work within these systems. And then, and it is already, and it is going to be something that is going to continue to get progressively worse as we come into the unwinding of the public health emergency. One of the other things I wanted to highlight, just to kind of stress to you the impact that this is having, that this is not just a Winona County problem, that this is a problem that is statewide. I have a sheet here from the Minnesota Department of Human Services that we can provide for you if you want, but the federal contractor findings from the Minnesota Department of Human Services, it goes into multiple different areas that talks about income had not been verified within the previous 12 months, caseworker error. Undocumented pregnant women approved for coverage, caseworker error. Income verification not on file, caseworker error. Income incorrectly calculated, caseworker error. Resources and assets not verified, caseworker error. And the list continues on and on and on. And it is not that we have incompetent workers throughout the state of Minnesota. It is just a system that is very, very cumbersome, antiquated, and very burdensome to be able to work within. So I just really want to encourage you, whenever you see anything regarding systems modification for our public assistance programs in any DHS systems modernization, I ask that you support that in moving that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Dave Kramer, our highway engineer, is the next presenter.
Good afternoon, legislators, and thanks for taking the time with us today. Dave Kramer, County Highway Engineer. As you're probably aware, Winona County is a member of MICA, Minnesota Intercounty Association, and that group spends a fair amount of time putting together a really good list of legislative priorities. And I would suggest, looking through that, because all of those things are important, but there's two specific things I'd like to highlight today, and those are things that essentially directly affect our routine projects. And the first is bridge replacements. the vast majority of bridge replacements, either on the county system or on a city street, will have as part of their funding, the bridge bond funding. It's just, it requires, periodic approval by the legislature as part of the bonding bill, or sometimes there's cash put in there. But it's really bread and butter for our bridge program. Winona County has in our construction program in the next 2 years, we have 5 bridges on our county road system that would be replaced, that we have identified as part of those bridges. Funding would be roughly $2 million of bridge bond funding. And right now that fund is depleted. So as a bonding bill moves forward, and I think Micah's ask is 200 million in bridge bond funding. Just to, I would request put a healthy amount in there, because our roads are useless if you can't get across the bridge safely. The other thing is the local road wetland replacement program. Both at the federal and state level, there's a requirement if we essentially fill a wetland as part of a road project that we have to replace that. Usually it's 2 to 1. The local road wetland replacement program, I would say, is a rare, rarely efficient, or a very highly efficient program for accomplishing what we're required to do. So essentially the Board of Water and Soil Resources, Bowser, is responsible under that program to create wetlands, and then those are used to replace typically if we have a bridge project, it might impact like a fraction of an acre, and that would get replaced by Bowser. But if they don't have those wetlands ready to go, it can cause our projects to not be able to move forward. A few years ago, there were literally hundreds of millions of projects that were in jeopardy because that bank was empty. So that wetland program has been traditionally funded through bonding, which can be sporadic, and the wetland replacement program isn't very sexy or exciting, compared with some of the other asks that are in the bonding bill. So it sometimes falls by the wayside. So the request is to establish base funding for that program, essentially through the normal budget process. So that would be the request for that. So it's not necessarily subject to the ebbs and flows of a bonding bill. And those are the 2 things I'd like to highlight. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. County Attorney Sonneman is our next speaker.
Thank you, Chair Meyer. And I also want to thank all of our legislative representatives and senators for taking the time to visit with us today. First, I want to clarify that what I have sent to you, which I think the county sent, as well as my remarks today, are from me as Winona County Attorney. But I also wanted to let you know that I am also on the executive committee of the Minnesota County Attorneys Association, and I'm sure you've met Bob Small and our lobbyists there. I'm also the Minnesota State Director of the National District Attorneys Association and on the board. So please contact me if you have any questions about MCAA or NDAA and issues that come up at the statewide level or the federal level. But again, what I'm talking about today is Winona County specific, and my role as Winona County Attorney. And as Commissioner Meyer already mentioned, my first request on behalf of the county is to, yes, pass the local option sales tax to fund our Winona County Jail construction. And I have been working with, and thank you to Commissioner Jacob, I got to switch that, Representative Jacob, and Representative Pulowski, as well as Senator Miller and Senator Miller's staff person, Maureen Watson, who's on this call. Thank you. But those are in the works in the revisor's office and on their way to being sponsored. Thank you by Representative Pulowski and Senator Miller. The other issue that I have brought up that's near and dear to the criminal reform part of our work here in Winona County, but also affecting the Winona County budget, is asking for increased funding to support existing drug courts. There's a lot of money out there to start drug courts, to implement drug courts, but once you get started and are successful, the funding is limited. And in fact, we just went through a process where the Judicial Council was trying to divvy up limited funds And some counties who have successful drug courts lost funding. We did not, thank goodness, but our funding is only $86,000 a year. It hasn't changed for years. And it's over $100,000 to run our drug court. And that the difference between that and the $86,000 comes from the Winona County budget and property tax levies. So I am asking that there be a focus on fuller funding of treatment courts, both across the state, but particularly in Winona County, where we have a very successful program. We've graduated over 45 people who are now successful citizens in our county. The third thing that I'd like to address, and this is where, as I gave that little speech about my role as the MCAA board member, you've probably have had some discussions or have had some heard from our MCAA about the creation of the Office of Juvenile Restorative Justice. I've reviewed that bill as a Winona County attorney and as a attorney who has experienced the benefits of restorative justice. When I was a public defender 30 years ago, Wabasha County had a very robust restorative justice program. Winona County then started theirs, and it's very robust. And when I read that bill, I'm concerned that it's creating another office that's unnecessary. And I know that's probably sacrilegious to some people, but it's a, especially I would say out here in greater Minnesota, we do things pretty well, but we need more funding. And the county pays the salaries in our restorative justice program. And the rest is through fundraising, including our restorative justice tournament, which I see Representative Pulaski is on now, and he's played in that tournament. And it's a great tournament, but and Ms. Holte's played in it and I've played in it, but we need more funding than raising money through our golf tournament. So I'd ask you to look at, rather than spending money on a new office of restorative justice that's going to create grant programs, which again, so many of our programs rely on grant funded dollars. And there's so much administrative cost, so much administrative time that's taken from on the ground, face-to-face work with participants in those programs when we have to write and report on grants. So I would ask you to look carefully at that. There's no fiscal note on that bill, and it's House File 46 and Senate File 55. But direct funding to help existing programs would be, I think, a better use of those dollars, as well as take a survey of the programs that are out there in the state. There's good programs, there's programs that need help. That is my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to thank Senator or Representative Pulaski for joining us. I understand that you had another commitment at the last minute. We have 5 speakers from the county, and we're on the last one, and that's Bob Bambenek, who is our county recorder. And Bob, go ahead.
Commissioner Meyer, thank you. Representative Jacob and Representative Pulaski and Senators Miller and Drazkowski, thank you for the time. I'm talking about home sales and where we might be with home mortgage payments as we look into 2023. During the last 2 years, home sales in our county went up an average of 5.5%. That's about the best there was in the country. Not very far from us, it's 30 and 40% increases. Even though we had a very healthy increase, the higher costs of the present economy that we're living in is seemingly starting to stress the ability to make home mortgage payments on time. Foreclosure notices in Winona County in 22 went up to 29. That's more than double what they were with the 13 we had in 21. In addition, 250 mortgages were amended. And in some of those cases, if not a majority, it simply was to provide more time to make the mortgage payments. It seems that all taxpayers, homeowners in Minnesota, homeowners paying taxes, could benefit from an increase in the market value exclusion and also from the property tax refund. These two programs, which are in place and they're working with some additional monies infused, could be a very big benefit right at this particular time for all homeowners in Minnesota. The other point today is that we have this afternoon what is believed to be in excess of 150 people looking for a home in Winona County. And some of them have been looking between 3 and 4 years and not been successful. If there were some funds that were made available for an offset to the very, very high construction costs that we're experiencing, it certainly would be beneficial to the housing economy in Winona County and this entire area. With the numbers of people that are looking, it's very challenging to expect that we're going to be being able to meet the demand without some assistance from the state legislature. Those are the points that I had for today. I want to thank you and appreciate this time.
Thank you so much, Bob. We are doing great on time. We have a half hour left, and we would like to hear updates from our legislators. In the order that we have on our agenda, this would be from Senator Miller first, Senator Drazkowski second, Representative Pulowski third, and then Representative Jacob fourth. If you could keep your comments to 5 to 7 minutes, then we'll be able to be respectful of everyone's time and finish at 2 o'clock. So Senator Miller.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for putting this meeting together. Always great to hear from folks, and thankfully we were able to get everyone together today virtually. So appreciate that very much. The state of Minnesota has a massive budget surplus, $18 billion. My guess is when the February forecast comes out, it'll be even more. My number one priority this session is to eliminate the state income tax on Social Security benefits. Minnesota is one of only 11 states now that still taxes these Social Security benefits. I believe it's long overdue to provide seniors this much deserved relief. In addition to tax relief for senior citizens, I also support a large income tax reduction for working Minnesotans. The reason why the state has a surplus as large as it is because the state is over collecting from the taxpayers. So I believe the vast majority of the surplus dollars should be returned to the folks that are paying those taxes. With that said, I am not opposed to some additional spending. I think we didn't really hear too much about it today, but law enforcement, I'm hearing from communities across the district I represent and the communities across the state of Minnesota that we need to provide more incentives to not only retain current police officers, but recruit new police officers. So I think that certainly should be a priority. Education has long been a bipartisan issue here at the Capitol. I support some additional funding for education, but I would also like to see reforms. We've seen test scores continue to decline. We've seen literacy reading scores continue to decline. So I think we need to have a strong focus on literacy to make sure that we make investments in teachers to make sure that they have the tools they need to teach kids the skills they need to be successful in the classroom. And along with that, roads and bridges, always something that I've long been a strong advocate for. I support a reasonably priced bonding bill as long as it focuses on core infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, asset preservation, water and sewer infrastructure, those types of projects I would be very supportive of. And I'm just trying to look through the other notes here. I, again, appreciate you all bringing forward your priorities. Always look forward to listening to your thoughts, ideas, and concerns facing the state. Along with the priorities that I shared, there are a lot of concerns with legislation that's moving forward. We don't have enough time for me to discuss all of those, but we're counting on Representative Plowski to bring some sensibility and reasonableness to some of the legislation that's being proposed in the House and the Senate.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Senator Drazkowski. Working on it. There.
All right, I'm there. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your presentation. I think Senator Miller covered a lot of the kind of the fundamental fiscal issues. Yeah, a huge $18 billion over collection of the people's money. About 12 billion of that is one time. That's the money it's accumulated from past bienniums, including the current one we're in, which will end on June 30th of this year. The other 5 or 6 billion is recurring every single biennium, and that, as the senator mentioned, will probably increase given some of the things we've seen in the past few months. Those collections actually outpacing the November forecast numbers, and we probably will see a higher number in February when we get to that benchmark that we will set the budget work from. So the governor just released his budget proposal yesterday, and some of us are trying to catch our breath here because the majorities in the House and Senate have been bringing bills at the fastest rate and the fastest volume, which I'm sure Representative Plowski will love to expound on. But they've been bringing them in numbers and at a pace that is unparalleled since I've been in the legislature. Undoubtedly, the Democrats see this trifecta as the ability for them to fully implement their agenda, including very far left radical ideological ideas that they have fostered for so long. They really believe that they have some sort of mandate from the voters that they read into the tea leaves of the election results. As a matter of fact, in the Minnesota Senate, the Democrats have the majority by 187 votes. If 187 votes had flipped in one Senate seat, the majority would be opposite of what it is now. So that being said, we're seeing that House File 1 and Senate File number 1 are both in their respective bodies bills to bring fully unabashed, unbridled, unregulated, unimaginable abortion into our statutes, giving us really the most radical and extreme abortion laws on the planet. That passed the Minnesota House last week. It's scheduled for the Minnesota Senate this Friday. I and others have been developing amendments for that in order to bring some sensibilities to that proposal. They will also be bringing gun control bills. They'll also be bringing bills to have brand new taxes on employers and on citizens, especially, and that I find that especially concerning, especially when we're looking and staring down the largest unimaginable deficit in the history of our, the largest unimaginable surplus in the history of our state. And they're coming forward with tax increases from what we heard yesterday in the governor's proposal, and we are seeing the bills coming forward. It was mentioned marijuana. They're going to bring that and pass that into law. So I appreciate the thoughts about making that, Marcia, more sensible and trying, if you have specific things as you see the proposal, let us know, and we will do what we can to try to sand some edges off and bring things so that they work better. So like you said, it isn't something that is fully on your shoulders. One bill I think that should concern you that are interested in public safety is there's a bill to allow driver's license for illegal aliens that simply requires someone to attest as to their residency in order to get a driver's license. In other words, I promise, I double swear that this is true. That is going to be the measure by which people will get driver's license. I'm concerned that it will undermine the integrity of our driver's license system. undermine the integrity of our law enforcement system. As a matter of fact, Section 10 in the bill, if I remember the section number correctly, actually directs and says that if the Department of Public Safety becomes aware that an individual is not here legally and they have a driver's license in the Department of Public Safety's records, the Department of Public Safety is directed in the bill, if it gets put into law, that they cannot tell an individual, another government agency, or even a court about that reality. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a sanctuary state, and that is what is in the bill. So anyway, those are some things to maybe update you on what's going on here. I appreciate again the things you had to say. I was listening attentively to the realizing we have $18 billion, to the discussion about the Health and Human Services computer systems. This would be the time to do things like that. I think that makes sense. And I think we can really find some bipartisan approaches in there. And hopefully we can get the majority to listen to some of those. So that's all I have. Thank you again, and have a great week.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Representative Pulowski.
Yes, I apologize for being late. I was in the Capital Investment Committee. So this is for Bob Bambanek. We just passed out of the Capital Investment Committee, House File 302, eligible use of housing infrastructure bonds, insurance of housing infrastructure bonds prescribed, bonds issued. So this is a rather large improvement on our housing. And Bob, if you want to take a look at that and then get back to me, and you're going to see further bills being passed. Notice that we're passing this separately. I approve of doing what we're doing in the House. We are moving very fast. So the county attorney, yesterday we passed out of the Rules Committee, a bill that had been languishing for 4 years to assist our county attorneys. I know that Karen Sonneman has been pushing for that bill for some time, and that bill was passed. It'll be on the House floor soon. We are moving at great speed, and most of it is simply picking up bills that had been left behind previous sessions, tweaking them for this session, and moving them forward. Our goal is not to have the huge omnibus bills of the past, but to have individual bills or bills scaled to a size that are comprehensible. You're also going to see, it appears now, joint Senate and House targets the second week of March. This is 2 months ahead of schedule. This will allow us to put even the finance bills together early and to make sure they're put together with input from the public, but also at a size that will be understandable. I approve of the way the House is moving. I think it's long overdue that we started having individual bills on the House floor. The consent calendar will be put in place. It'll be returned after 10 years. So you're going to see a host of individual bills on the floor that would have previously been dumped into omnibus bills. And these bills are mainly non-controversial, but still it's better to have individual bills and large omnibus bills. And with that, I'll stop and we'll go to Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Representative Pulowski. Representative Jacob.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for putting this event on here today. It's very important to the community. So first of all, the local option sales tax, of course, coming from the Winona County Board, I understand the importance of that. And I did initially start working on that. But once I saw Representative Pulowski is working on that bill, we'll move forward with, I'll just support Representative Pulowski and his work on that bill, and hopefully we'll be able to get that through. And again, you know, I think all the representatives here, senators, have talked about the massive surplus. So for me, Mr. Steve Drazkowski and myself, we both worked on a Social Security, ending the Social Security tax bill. I've seen a number of those bills floating around, and so with that kind of surplus, it's going to be hard to really justify not coming up with an end to that Social Security tax. That's something that I heard just time and time again on the campaign trail. And with respect to the amount of bills that are being brought forward, so as a first-time representative, what I understand is that there's threefold the amount of bills that were introduced at this point 2 years ago. So it's just a flood of new bills there. And I do want to, I guess, thank Representative Plowski for joining the Republicans in the House File number 1. That was very hard to see the abortion bill move forward the way it did, but it was good to see at least some support there across the aisle. And I guess being a former county commissioner and especially Winona County Commissioner, Olmsted County has already been up here once and had me out to Olmsted County. So, but being from Winona County, certainly understand all those unfunded mandates and pieces that Winona County's been struggling with. Not going to forget about that as I move forward as your state representative. The committees that I sit on here, the Ag Committee, the Environmental and Natural Resources. So a lot of the areas that you saw me deal with at Winona County, I'll be extending that into the state here and you know, where I have background and where I can use my past knowledge to help the state out. So a lot of experience there, but easy to support core services, emergency services, roads and bridges. You know, those pieces are, you know, clearly a priority to just about anyone you talk to. I am surprised that Karen Sanis wants to update that 1980s DOS system. Maybe we can get her set up with AOL or something like that. I don't know, for mail, but no, just getting there. Yeah, extremely antiquated, and I can understand the frustrations there. But you know, my position as county commissioner, really, it remains the same up here at the state. I always took a position of listen, learn, understand, strategize, and then implement and be accessible. So I'm going to carry those, you know, same pieces forward here at the state level. And please reach out to me if there's pieces you want me to work on, pieces that you need help with. That's what I'm here for. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jacob. Well, we're doing so well. We have about 15 minutes left. Commissioner Ward, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. I have more of a comment. You all had to campaign this summer, as I did, and it was very difficult to justify to constituents why Winona County continually, and I think almost every county in the state of Minnesota, raised their property taxes this year when the state is flush in money. The federal government just keeps, of course, printing money, which we can't do. So county program aid, and I know we've been kind of quiet, Association of Minnesota Counties has been kind of quiet on that. It's kind of on the back burner to increase the county program aid with a lot of this surplus, because we are continually being asked to do more with less, or shift the burden from, you know, state mandated programs to local property taxes. So just if county program aid comes up, please consider looking at what you're asking us to do and how those, you know, those costs keep rising significantly, and we just can't keep doing the same thing with less money. And you talked about, Senator Miller talked about the law enforcement incentives and such. We're all faced with finding employees and employees with the right training and the right background and everything. It's going to be, it's a struggle in every area: planning, zoning, health and human services is everywhere. There are shortages of law enforcement. One of my biggest fears is we're building a big jail, but I don't know if we're going to find people that we can hire to you know, do the functions that jail has to. So we need to somehow approach this employment situation. And somebody put it today in a separate conversation, maybe Minnesota can't go after quantity employment, but we sure got to go after quality employment and step up and have good, you know, people doing the right jobs. How we do that, I don't know. But yeah, again, it was hard to tell the constituents, I need more money at the county, but the state's got all this extra. It kind of made me feel bad. So consider what you're doing and how you're doing it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question or add something else? We still have about 10 minutes left. County Attorney Sonneman.
Don't get me started, but okay, here we go. When Commissioner Ward was talking about the legalization of marijuana, I think you mentioned that too, right?
Yep.
So as a county attorney and as a individual tax-paying citizen, I have real concerns about the legalization of marijuana because we have seen a rise in our child protection cases because of all the drug use. And as many people say, marijuana is a drug that starts people on a path to other drug use. But as other states have seen who have legalized marijuana, I think of Colorado, where they had a terrible increase in their emergency room visits, particularly with children who were ingesting gummies. So I just ask that as you look at that bill, the old adage, be careful what you wish for. And I know that you all take different positions on that, but it's kind of a rush. And just because Jesse Ventura wants legalization of marijuana in Minnesota, I don't think we should rush to that. We already have enough problems with legal alcohol consumption and the treatment costs that gives us. And Representative Pulaski, I'll just ask you to remember Judge Thompson's 10 cents a drink tax that we had pushed many years ago to try to highlight the problem that there are consequential costs to legislation like this that trickle down to the local level and that the counties then have to pay, and the state too, for people who are going to the hospital or our child protection cases. The other thing I'd like to just address is I was reading the governor's budget on the public safety issues, and there's a lot of focus on funding for police, which is great. But particularly on some of the issues like more funding for body cams. What people don't know is that when there's more body cams, which is great for one part of criminal justice, it comes down to my office where we have to go through those body cam videos and redact, and we don't have the staff, we don't have the funding. We need more funding then to be able to hire more people to go through what is a discovery issue. And so it's great to have body cams, but and the same thing with data practices, which I won't go into in depth, but you'll probably be seeing from the County Attorneys Association, because I'm the chair of our election law committee, but it's the same issue all across the board with data practices issues, where we're getting so much requests for data from at the county level. And that's what I am concerned about too. When we've got body cams, people want to see those, that's great. But we need the staff then to go through those and make sure that sensitive confidential information is redacted. So there's always a cost to what looks like a great thing. So I just ask you to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Anyone else have some comments? I guess I would just take a minute and make a pitch. Our emergency first responders in rural Minnesota are really struggling. The cost to certify an EMT are very expensive. There's not money to do it. Many of those are volunteer firefighters or volunteer ambulance services. They're struggling to get volunteers, but they're also struggling to keep them running and keeping them on the road. So additional funding sources for our rural first responders, I think would be well worth it and greatly appreciated. Anything else? If not, I want to thank everybody for taking time to share with us this afternoon and for your thoughtfulness and for your public service. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.